Let's get started with darkness manipulation.
Nighttime, space, the abyss, the absence of light.
All of these things are just like the other, but there's one term to describe them all: darkness. I had to find a clever way to introduce the topic, and while you may or may not agree on its effectiveness, what you will agree on with me is that users of Erebokinesis can create, shape, and manipulate darkness. That's right, it's Erebo as in Ereboinesis. Never heard of that before either. Now this should be a given, but in case there's any troublemakers out there, darkness in its simplest terms is the partial or total absence of light. So yeah, now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this ability is exactly what's labeled on the can. But that doesn't mean that it's not interesting. In fact, it's quite the opposite. With so many renditions in popular culture of what this ability exactly is, now you guys are probably wondering why I said think. Well, it's because it's darkness. You can't see darkness. We think we can, but we really can't. But before we sink any further into this abyss of knowledge, like stated earlier, darkness is, well, pretty dang dark. And if you don't know what kind of information is silhouetted in here, a lot by the way, then it'd be best to stay where you are. But in my benevolence, I can possibly guarantee a form of night vision if you guys do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. And while you're at it, be a pal and hit that share button if you want to bring this information out of the dark and into the light. But if you don't need my gift of night vision and you're just here for the application, users, and uses for this power, then skip ahead to this time. But if you're ready to look into the pitch black well of knowledge, then grab a flashlight and let's continue. You never know what might be looking back, so it'd be in your best interest to not blink. Okay, I'm going to say this and I hope that it remains true throughout the recording process and the posting of this video. But I'm 1,000,000,000% sure that darkness was the first thing that existed and will be what's left after everything is said and done. This has been transferred to world culture wonderfully, as ever since humans have existed, so has darkness, in some way, shape, or form. Even when it's completely lit outside, you still contain darkness inside your body. You know, the lack of light kind. And it's that fear, that first primal fear that has, of course, inspired myth and legends of beings of night who play perhaps the most important role in existence, but remains hidden, refusing the spotlight. More on that later. The concept of darkness in myths is normally associated with nighttime, death, and other negative aspects. But you know what's funny? You can say that humans fear darkness more than we fear death, because deities of death are popular and well known throughout world and popular culture. But can you guys name a single deity of darkness off the top of your head? Go ahead, I'll wait. Yes, there are darkness deities. Yeah, but that's what I thought. No, the average person can't. So, oftentimes they're linked with another concept or combined with one that overshadows, another pun, the darkness aspect of their being. I mean, there could be exceptions, but then again, there are always exceptions. And in my experience, the exception normally proves the rule. But darkness has also shaped legends as well, in the most meta way possible because of what it represents, a lack of light or visibility. So, in the times of our less civilized and less educated predecessors, the combination of an undeveloped mind, you know, the one that fosters superstitions as fact, and the lack of technology are just the first two steps in this equation. The last and most important is darkness. And by that, I mean the lack of visibility. It's easy to create a legend of something you believe you saw or believe you heard on a dark, stormy night after staying up for several days, while halfway starving to death, while at the same time swearing by it and passing it on to others who share your unfortunate condition. Those times were not fun. It's common for this ability, when portrayed, to be associated with light. Not in the sense that these two are the same, but because these two are as different as powers can get. But, surprise, surprise, they cannot exist without each other. If all there was darkness, we wouldn't know what darkness is because there's nothing to contrast it. And while we were able to talk about all the scientific and fancy mumbo jumbo behind light in the previous video on light manipulation, check that out, the video is in the description, unfortunately, darkness doesn't have such a luxury, even though it's arguably the most unique element in existence, not to mention the most abundant thing in existence as well. So, it's not a fair stretch to say that dark matter, dark energy, and heck, let's include the mythical concept of dark magic as well. these concepts either make up darkness or are roommates with darkness, as we understand it. But regardless, they are heavily related. Dark matter is way more common than regular matter, making up about, 27% of the universe? While dark energy seems to make up about 68% of the universe? Is that math right? So riddle me this, Shay. If all this type of matter and energy is out there and in such abundance, where is it? And why can't we see it? Well, that goes back to what the word dark means, my fellow nerds. Say it with me. Because darkness is the absence of light. So that means that dark matter exists, we just can't detect it. And once we do detect it, it will no longer be classified as dark matter. But going back to darkness, that absence of light creates opportunity, allowing anything to hide in it, both real and imaginary. But this necessarily isn't a negative, as darkness can be used and is used by both predators and prey for concealment in order to gain an advantage in any situation. If you wanted to look at it in a liberal light, or lack of light, you and I, the birds and the bees, along with the worms and the trees, use darkness and then condemn it like a Honda. Not what I wanted to say, but you guys get my meaning. This really shows that contrary to popular belief, darkness is way more neutral than sinister because it's what hides in the darkness that leads to the creation of myths and legend. This is only cemented further by the fact that humans don't possess night vision, and in conditions where one or more of the senses is negatively affected, the outcome is never pretty, which can lead to fear and paranoia and cause auditory or visual hallucinations. But there's another component to darkness besides the material world. There's also the psychological world to consider. And unfortunately, we tend to ignore the mental aspect of a lot of things we endeavor to understand, which is cool, but when you're trying to extrapolate the relationship between darkness and humans, this can get pretty difficult without exploring the mental, which is why humans refer to certain actions or ideas that others won't consider as taboo or dark, or why we title an entire age where knowledge was erased or hidden for centuries as the Dark Ages. Not because they were necessarily evil or sinister, although you could argue that point of view if you wanted, but remember, dark doesn't mean evil. It means the absence of light or detectability, which when you think about how it is nowadays, most people use dark to mean evil and evil to mean dark. Well, let's delve further into the concept of dark magic that was mentioned earlier. I'm here to argue that it isn't a malevolent force or a negative side to just plain abracadabra magic. Based on what we discussed throughout this video, I'll boldly stand up, even though I'm sitting down, and say that it's just a classification of magic that has a hidden, undetectable, or unknowable aspect to it. Now, whether that shows itself in the form of a hidden toll or an implied cause that could cause harm, that doesn't mean that it's evil. The evil one is the person who uses whatever form of dark magic in their medium for evil. But if you feel like it, you can run the gamut with this power and use the chicken and egg argument to argue whether darkness and evil can exist without each other or if they're a match made in hell. You guys want another example? A figure that everyone knows, Batman, the Dark Knight. Nothing evil about this guy, but he is a secretive dick who lives a secluded life from the majority of everyone and uses that secretiveness and his hidden access to a nearly unlimited and undetectable amount of tools to stand guard as a mysterious watchman and protective entity to the city of Gotham. So continuing from that theme, when Tony Stark told Steve Rogers in Avengers Age of Ultron, "I don't trust a guy without a dark side," he didn't mean he didn't trust a person who hides his sinister intentions. He was literally saying that if you don't seem like you have a hidden agenda, secret, or even a type of self-interest, that makes you more suspicious to him. This is also why Mark Twain is quoted as saying, "Everyone is a moon and has a dark side, which he never shows to anybody," which is a messed up way of looking at the world. But it's also a unique way of saying that even though some of us stand out or above relative darkness, we all contain a form of a subjective darkness, making darkness the great equalizer and great nullifier that spares none and is something that all have to overcome. Now, I'm neither a billionaire genius or a world-renowned writer, so I wouldn't know. Not yet, that is. But it's something that I've noticed, and if it holds any kind of weight, it's a new way to look at or portray darkness in popular culture. Well, at least for me. You guys might have known this already. But given the eternal, intimate, and thematic dance darkness has always had with evil, the prevalence of darkness as an element is often used by villains in a way you can't ignore, usually signaling that this guy right here, is probably an antagonist. Even when villains don't have these abilities, darkness-based powers are almost always relegated to anti-heroes or other morally gray individuals. But like I stated in previous videos, you can do anything you want with superpowers. Even have a paragon of good or the White Knight use darkness-based powers to varying levels of acceptance. Either way, darkness-based powers are frequently associated with negative emotions, fear, hatred, anger, pain, etc. Because symbolically, darkness, the dark, represents evil at its heaviest or mystery at its lightest. And mystery is a main part of the absence of light. As stated earlier, darkness is more than likely the substance that induces the most primal fear in the human psyche, so don't expect it to be pleasant. But it can be portrayed in a less brutal light by giving it a, cruel mercy kind of feel. I think that's what it's called. Where the alternative is so bad, death by darkness seems better by comparison. Even when the darkness is not as actively malevolent, it's still dealt with in a serious manner. A common example of invoking the gentle death aspect includes, but is not limited to, dying in your sleep, using the death to immediately start a beneficial rebirth, or using it in defense of others. Evil darkness users, though, will often live up to their stereotypical elemental nature, enjoying the cruelty and chaos they create, whereas others will normally become stoic, suppressing their negative emotions, by suppressing all their emotions, or they'll just have a lot of internal baggage and drama, making them insufferable to be around for obvious reasons. Nobody likes those kind of characters. Users can be seen playing a role from mysterious leader all the way to psycho on a leash, the guy that they literally have to put on a leash. So it's obvious for them to end up a loner or outcast either intentionally or through their powers or personality. Users rarely play a role as a main character for both story and metatextual reasons, as darkness is something that doesn't take center stage. In fact, we actively try to eradicate darkness wherever we can in our day-to-day lives. And when it's time for darkness to reign supreme, it's mainly viewed as something to dread or to wait out until it's over, which is why humans aren't nocturnal creatures, normally. But anything this scary has to have an awesome side, right? And you'd be more than correct. Popular culture has portrayed individuals summoning black-colored creatures associated with the night. Use your imagination for that. So if a hero's signature move is a combo attack where he cloaks his weapon in, light energy or light magic, or the medium's equivalent, the darkness counterpart to that move would simply involve cloaking their weapon in darkness instead. Oddly enough, darkness itself is used as an uber element, just like its counterpart, light manipulation. If light can heal, create lasers, inspire allegiance, and purify evil, then darkness has been shown having self-contained dimensional properties that allow it to absorb, negate, or corrupt anything opposing it. Heck, the power itself might act like a portal or tether to a greater source of darkness that comprises of the same element, which would double up and act as a gravitational maw that drags in anything through the fundamental force. That's gravitational darkness. It will normally be portrayed as something predictable or uncontrollable, something that's always gonna go wrong at the wrong time, or being a catalyst for something that could go wrong at the wrong time. Colors associated with this power are black, purple, or basically a darker shade of a cooler color. Oftentimes, darkness is given further emphasis on how visually dark it is by coating or outlining the solid black color and a slightly lighter, cooler color, like blue, gray, or purple. This is usually a stylistic choice and isn't alluded to in story unless it's plot relevant. I'm not gonna lie, it does look pretty cool. Whoever came up with that idea is a genius. Stats for this eternal power tend to be all over the place, and various creators have a hard time trying to actually pin down stereotypical stats. But let's try this. Users are normally portrayed having medium to high attack power, defense that ranges from extremely high to extremely low, decent versatility, and low speed. That last one to me is weird because ain't nothing slow about darkness, considering the fact that as soon as light goes away, darkness is immediately there. So me personally, I give speed the same as the others, ranging from low to extremely high. But to give you guys an answer, I would say it depends on what properties you want your darkness to have, which makes this ability fairly well-rounded. And what happens to abilities that are fairly well-rounded? They tend to blend into the background and not really stand out, just like actual darkness. So now that we have that out the way, we can get to the good part. With the power to manipulate darkness comes the natural ability to attack with, defend with, and control darkness with darkness attacks. Or manipulate other objects by surrounding them in darkness, giving you a telekinetic effect over the target with Umbra Telekinesis. Umbra literally meaning shadow or darkness. Even with a basic level of darkness control, it should give you a natural affinity for the element, allowing you to survive and adapt to dark environments with darkness adaptation. This seemingly simple power opens the doors for a lot others, such as enhanced senses, better sense of smell, hearing, and the like. But the star of the show is night vision, which will allow you to see clearly in any dark condition. So we'll add that to the list too. And you know what else you can add? Add shadow manipulation to that as well, because shadows are a form of darkness. But that's as far as we'll go with that ability. While more gifted users are capable of harnessing that darkness, giving it mass and solidifying it with darkness solidification. This gives the user an added bonus of being able to create shapes both complex and non-complex with Umbra Kinetic constructs. A connection to darkness at this level should grant the user the capability to create their own source of darkness with darkness generation. And since they can generate their own darkness, why can't they take it from outside sources with darkness absorption? And from there, if you have enough skill, you should be able to gain strength from what you absorbed or what you're surrounded in with darkness empowerment. But remember, kids, darkness is the absence of light. So if you have an ability to negate light, then why wouldn't that fit under light absorption? And if you can absorb visible light, why shouldn't you be able to hide within the lack of visibility with camouflage? The most gifted users, however, are capable of somehow healing themselves or others using the lightless element with darkness healing. To be honest with you, this technique is probably like a holy or sacred kind of darkness, that takes more on the more positive themes that I mentioned earlier. They are able to piece themselves back together into whatever form they had prior to the damage taken through darkness with Umbra Kinetic regeneration. But what if you're not much of a healer? That's cool. Don't worry about it, because at this level, it shouldn't be any trouble to infuse darkness into whatever combative capabilities you possess with Umbra Kinetic combat. You should be able to transform your life energy into darkness with darkness aura, or take it a step further and transform your physical form into that of darkness with darkness mimicry. While the best of the best, those that have mastered this ability to its fullest and are pushing primordial levels of power, can shift the previously mentioned ability outward and affect both organic and non-organic targets with darkness transmutation. Users are capable of enhancing whatever locomotive capabilities they possess using darkness to either propel themselves through the air via Umbra Kinetic flight, or riding a piece of solidified darkness with Umbra Kinetic surfing. Remember the dimensional qualities I mentioned earlier? How in some universes, darkness has the potential to pass between the barriers of reality or create its own pocket realm? Don't ask how, don't ask why. But that alone would allow the user to shift from one location to another because they understand the fundamental connection between all shadows and darkness with umbrageous teleportation. Now they can do this in one or two ways: by merging with the darkness and appearing somewhere else, or by creating a portal out of darkness, dark energy, dark matter, via dark portal creation, and use dimensional storage to store stuff into darkness or shadow. And we might as well add dimensional travel to that as well, because enable to enter their own pocket dimension of darkness and shadow. But what if your target is insistent on not being dragged kicking and screaming into your own personal hell? Well, take the choice out of their hands and emit a form of gravitational darkness so dense, not unlike a black hole, that you can drag them in by force through your darkness with gravity manipulation. If you'd like more information on how gravity and darkness are related, but also at the same time not related or whatever, check out my video on gravity manipulations, one of my most popular videos. The link is in the description. And last, but certainly not least, with the capability to generate darkness and or summon it from an unreachable pocket realm, you can summon darkness so dark, black, abysmal, abyssal, whatever you call it, and whatever word you want to use, that the user is able to create a field of absolute impenetrable darkness that completely negates sight and also may dull or completely negate the other senses as well. They are potentially able to generate darkness so intense that it can completely obliterate objects in its path via absolute darkness, which is essentially wiping or concealing things from existence. Because if you can't see it, is it really there? And there you have it. Darkness manipulation in a nutshell. An ability that exists on both ends of the spectrum. And while not my preferred ability, I can definitely see the use in something like this, although I pretty much prefer something with more utility. This power, like stated earlier, is something that's usually portrayed in an elemental thematic struggle, contrasted against users of light manipulation, fire manipulation, or even electricity manipulation. The character that plays the role of the, metaphorical light or big good can also be seen contrasted against a user of this power. So, it's common to see this ability eventually overpowered by those who possess the powers I stated earlier, because the light produced can purify or fight off the darkness. This power is not normally one that a sane person actively tries to seek out, because either of its implied evil or corrupting influence, or requires an unsavory trade-off to be used efficiently. But that alone isn't the only possible downfall. The user may not be able to create their own source of darkness and might be limited to manipulating pre-existing sources. This is obviously a massive bane or boon, as during the day, unless you can extend your control through shadows, you're at a massive disadvantage. So, long story short, I hope you can survive until night, or at least until you get into some shade. And that might also extend into your connection with the element as well, because if there's a possibility that you're not in sync with darkness, for whatever reason, you'll have trouble wielding this dark power. And if you come across the one person that has Umbra kinetic immunity, well, just hope that you can survive them too. And lastly, you won't get far without any kind of determination, skills, or knowledge of your natural limits or what the power is actually capable of. And now, with all that out of the way, it's time to place this ability on the scale. Remember, darkness manipulation isn't a dark and malevolent force. At its core, it's just the absence of light, where nothing can be seen. It's what hides in the darkness that creates the evil and the oogie boogie spooky crap that we all associate and fear. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, the Shey scaling system gives this power a shrouded 6. Not bad in the least, but it does take a special kind of person to use this power, and an even more special kind of person to use this power efficiently, or the way that it's supposed to be used. Thanks for watching. You guys think of any more applications for this power? Jot it down in the comments section. Start a discussion. The index does not grow without you guys. I'll be back with an entirely new power, breakdown, and analysis fairly soon. Deuces.